And welcome to the Business Alchemy podcast. I'm Jonathan, and with me today is Beth. And today we've got a great topic that may cause a little bit of consternation, well, both for us and you, and that's money. We're going to talk about how do we handle things when we've got the money, and how do we handle it when money's a bit tighter and maybe a little bit more sparse. And if you're an entrepreneur and you run a business, you know you experience both of those scenarios. Sometimes cash is flush and cash flow is great. Other times, well, not so much, and you're wondering how payroll is going to get made this week, Friday. We've been in both scenarios, and we'd like to talk to you today about that and some of the ways that we've handled the ups and the downs and how we as a team and as our independent entrepreneurs manage that. So, Beth, I kind of stole the thunder, but anything you want to add to that about what we're going to talk about today?
Well, I think it's more where we should start today. And I really want to focus in on when you're a new entrepreneur or you're starting a new business. I really think it's important to get your ducks in a row before you step into that new position, especially if you may be giving up another position with a company that has benefits, that has steady money coming in to start that new business. You really need to put a lot of thought into that. And there are steps to prepare to do that.
Very good point. Very good point. Well, why don't we start with kind of our history when we started and some of the goals we've made, some of the mistakes we've made. And I'm thinking particularly of going back to the foundations of Valorous Circle when we talked about a couple of key things that were really important to us. And one of those was finances and how we handled that. Do you want to share with everybody a little bit maybe about how we got there and what those three key decisions we made that we were going to abide by, two of which we gave up, but one of which we've still stuck to?
Absolutely. So we had decided that one, we weren't going to have any debt. Two, that we weren't going to have any employees. And three, that we weren't going to have any office space. And obviously, we have had employees. I do have employees. You have employees. And we do have office space. So we definitely kind of pushed those two aside out of necessity. But also out of necessity, we have not gone into debt. You haven't in your business. I haven't in my business. We haven't personally outside of a mortgage. I will say it's really hard to have enough money to buy a house without a mortgage. But outside of that one key factor or that one key item, we have not gone into debt. And that is really attributed to the pain we felt when we were in debt. And we have been in debt and we have had some really tough years going through and making sure that the bills were paid. And then later on, we had to make choices about whether we were going to get paid or our employees were going to get paid. And of course, we always made sure our employees got paid first, even if it was to our detriment and our sacrifice.
No, and I think that's a really good thing. We haven't always subscribed specifically to the no debt rule, and due to pain that caused in our lives, we made the decision that when Valorous Circle got formed back in 2010, that was going to be one of the key aspects of it, and it's one that has carried through even after your purchase of the company and taking over. You've done that, and I've done the same with Whitebeard Strategies, and I know. Well, I guess one of the things I'd like to talk about is you and I have both talked to business people and entrepreneurs who think we're flipping crazy for not having a bunch of credit cards that we get points on and that we're not running things up and all that. Do you want to talk for just a moment maybe about why it is that we determined that, at least for us and for growing the business, debt wasn't a good idea? Or maybe do you want me to start by talking about some of the things that's probably protected us from that didn't necessarily happen in our one of our original ventures?
Well, I'd like to actually start by going back a little bit further and to the fact when we met each other.
Yeah.
I had my own business at the time. You were working for another company, and
Yep.
we both had these entrepreneurial instincts, but we had to first clean up some of our monetary situation when we first met as well. And I
You're kind of
certainly
referring to my monetary situation more than yours.
well,
I was a mess, folks.
sometimes when you make money, anybody makes money, they want to spend that money. And it's really hard to convey to people, especially when it's new money. I mean, you haven't necessarily had it before, and now suddenly you've got a really good job, or maybe you have a business and business is doing really well. You see see all this cash coming in, and our instinct is to spend that instant gratification of buying lots of toys. You may buy a house. Well, great, we need to have somewhere to live, but are you buying too much of a house? You may want to
Yes.
buy a boat, or you might want to buy a brand new car instead of a used car. We make a lot of these choices for shiny and new that really hurt us later on. And if we can just delay that gratification a little bit so that we can save money first and then be able to buy some of these things used, but in total, so we don't have loans on them, it gives us more cash flow to be able then to start businesses or to be able to have or survive tough times where we have to pay the employees, but we can't pay ourselves. We then have money set aside because we've made some good choices in how to spend our money.
No, I couldn't agree more. I want to address one of those points a minute, and it's one that I know I've heard a lot that other business owners seem to understand, but I know a lot of at least team members don't necessarily understand. And that's it. In the early years, there are plenty of times that, at least in our experience, we weren't able to get paid when everybody else got paid.
Mhm.
And I know one of the commitments we made, which I'm confident was the right decision, was because I'd had the opposite happen, as you know, at a previous employer. We always pay the employees first. You and I were the last people to get paid. And if there wasn't enough money, we didn't get paid. And we
Mhm.
had to figure out another way to pay the bills and go through that. And I think that there's a lot of people that, look at businesses and go, wow, there's these big, awful corporations and they do all this. And I don't think enough people give credit that the vast majority of business owners out there really do care about their teams and work hard to do that. And I think it's
Mhm.
our responsibility as entrepreneurs, and one of the reasons we chose not to do debt, and I know I'm going on here, but is the fact that it's our responsibility to be financially sustainable and to have the financial
Yes.
acumen to protect our teams. We have people that are working for us and that rely on that paycheck, just like we rely on that
Mhm.
paycheck. But we have more control over the day-to-day finances than that employee does. And it's our responsibility to be prudent and stewardly with those funds so that we can meet our obligations, not only to our vendors, but to our team, probably even more importantly.
Absolutely. They trust us. There is a fiduciary responsibility I feel we have when
Yeah.
we have new members, new employees come on. One thing that not having debt allowed us to do is to, it allowed us to ensure that we could actually pay people and not have other obligations that had to be covered first because people are knocking at our door. But there's a problem with that. And when you don't take on debt and you do things from cash flow, growth moves more slowly
Yeah.
because you're not having a big burst of money. You can't go out and just hire a bunch of people that you can't afford because you borrowed the money to pay them. When you don't borrow that money, when you're not in debt, you bring people on from cash flow, but it takes longer than to bring people on. So we
So
had
true.
really good growth in Valor Circle the first 10 years, but it was slow growth. It was not some, rise to stardom and lots of money by any means. We had to pay people according to what we could pay based on the business we were getting. And so there's a fine balance as you bring people on to then know, okay, one, do we have enough for this person to do to justify having this position? Well,
Hmm.
quite often we would have to get ourselves or other employees to 100 or 125% capacity before we could really justify bringing on the extra person because of the extra cost. But
Yeah.
when you do that, it just makes things so much more stable. And a lot of employees and prospective employees really were happy to hear that we were financially sound, that we didn't have debt, because we have had only one employee ever in our history that I've had to let go because we couldn't afford them.
Yeah.
And that broke my heart. I mean, it was like I didn't want to have to do that, but things were tough and we had to narrow it down and get rid of some costs. And so I had to let an employee go. But it's only happened once. And we've had dozens of employees over almost 13 years. So it's just a more thoughtful process. And we really try to take that employee into consideration and their feelings, because they've got a family to support. And they're really trusting us to have a job for them when we say we have a job. We want to make sure that we can sustain that so that their family can be taken care of. The other point I wanted to make as well is not only is it important to pay your employees first, it's also important to pay the government. And you do not
Absolutely.
around with not paying taxes. So with in any employees that you have, any tax that you have on payroll, employers also have to pay, and I think it's a Michigan tax, might be partially federal too. But I know for us, it's about 7% extra. So on top of what comes out of directly the employees pay for the federal government, the state government, and for the city government, if there's a city income tax, you also have an additional 7% of whatever you're paying that employee that you have to pay. So there are a lot of extra costs that employees don't really realize that there are, and that's just one of them. But you have to make sure that you pay the federal government, the state government, the city government, or a whole lot of hurt is going to come down.
And we've seen others that have struggled with that. In fact, one of my past employers really struggled with that. And I remember when Valor Circle started, one of the things we really laid into was the fact that when we paid an employee, that money that was owed to the government was set aside and
Yes.
untouchable.
Mhm.
Because that's the previous employer of mine. That's where they got into trouble. Money got tight. They had set stuff aside for quarterly payments. And I believe they had set it aside, but then they raided that piggy bank, so to speak, because they needed money that month. And then when it
Mhm.
came time to make those quarterly payments, they couldn't. And if you haven't experienced that, and I'm thankful to say I haven't directly, but I did indirectly through this employer, the IRS isn't really kind and friendly when that happens. That's
No.
their money and they're going to get it from you, and they have unbelievable powers to do so.
Absolutely. What we do at Valera Circle is I actually have a separate payroll account. And so I each time I have pay that comes through that needs to be go out to employees, I take it out of the operating account and I place it into the payroll account. And I put the entire amount, including any extras, all of the government's taxes, that type of thing, that all goes in the payroll account so that it sits there until it's due. And I do not touch that account. So again, every time I have a payroll, I run that payroll. I then move the money over into the payroll account and then I pay directly out of that. And that ensures that I don't raid that money, that money doesn't just kind of filter away or disappear for other costs as it might if I keep it in my operating account.
Yeah, that separation is so important. Beth,
Mhm.
earlier you talked about one other thing that I want to address a moment, and that's that I think part of the reason entrepreneurs and business owners struggle with the no debt concept is that they're afraid they're going to miss opportunities. And there's some truth that you may miss an opportunity
Mhm.
if you don't have that credit card, you don't have that line of credit, things like that are going on. And you may, I'm definitely convinced that Valor Circle over the years, and maybe even Whitebeard in the last few months since I've started it, may have missed some opportunities because of that. In fact, we talked about one last night,
We
an
did.
opportunity that I have through Whitebeard Strategies to be on a panel and go speak to a number of my prospects. And we're just due to where Whitebeard is at right now. Again, we just started a couple months ago. The thousands of dollars that would take would drain all the funds that we have, and I don't think that's prudent to do because I don't think we're going to lose a lot by not going there. We may not gain some, and that's certainly a possibility, but we're not going to lose per se. And those decisions are hard for entrepreneurs to make. As you know, I was really struggling with that last night because I want to do this.
Mhm.
But from a financial perspective, you need to take a step back. And I think the most important thing I'd like to talk about here is yes, it may occasionally cost you an opportunity, but more frequently, it's going to save you from going overboard in an area that's not going to work out. Because
Mhm.
every entrepreneur, every business owner is confident that this new idea that we have that we want to go spend $10,000, $20,000 on, maybe just 500 if we don't have it, is going to make us 10 times more.
Mhm.
But we also know that not every one of those ideas actually pans out and makes us more money.
Visionaries, entrepreneurs who are visionaries always think they're going to make a lot of money. I mean, they've got these big hopes, they've got these big dreams. They tend to be very optimistic and idealistic. Yes, Jonathan, you are a great
That's
example.
me.
And that's wonderful because I tell you, it's big ideas that make big things happen. So I think that's a wonderful thing. But that needs to be balanced with some practicality, with some pragmatism. And so that's where I think it's really important to have someone, if you are a visionary entrepreneur in your life, who's more pragmatic, who can help you see the reality of things without crushing your dreams. Really have that balance because it's not wise just to plow out there, borrow a lot of money, throw it into this grand idea because that grand idea sometimes doesn't make it. In fact, most of them don't make it. If you look the statistics of new businesses, more than 50% of them don't make it beyond 2 years. And so it's important to really not get yourself in a hole as you're working on that new idea. I also strongly suggest that people who are starting a new business that they keep their old job. So even though you might be in a job that you're not terribly happy with, if it's at all possible, keep that job while you're starting your business because it's going to take a little while. You're going to have to build some momentum before you can sustain yourself on that new with that new business.
And I am the epitome of the positive thinker and the optimistic one, and we've been successful. But at the same point, we even had a conversation the other day. I mean, Whitebeard Strategies, which I founded back in June. No, July, had to think. So we're now in September. So we're not quite the first month. I didn't really focus on sales. So I started in August. So we're not even 2 months in. And of course, I figured by now we'd be rolling in cash. And okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but things are going well, but cash flow is not exactly what I want to call stellar at the moment. It's not bad.
Mhm,
Don't get me wrong. Things
mhm.
are going very well. But had you asked me back in June when we were doing all the planning and I was doing all the planning more, I would have been confident by now that I would have had a lot more money in the bank. That wasn't realistic on my part. It's just part of my optimistic nature. And I think
Mhm.
that's something we all fall into. Again, I should say all, many entrepreneurs fall into, especially when we're in startup mode. And not borrowing money, I know for Valor Circle, and I can tell you for Whitebeard Strategies, has saved us from getting into a hole that we now had to dig out of. And it's
Mhm.
never fun to have to dig your way out of a hole that you've dug financially.
No, we've been there. We've done that with the previous business that you and I had started together. We
Yeah.
dug a huge financial hole, and
Big
we
hole. Yeah.
we couldn't get out of it. And we ultimately, each of us had to declare bankruptcy, which was absolutely horrible. I'd never dreamed that something like that would happen. And both of us are very responsible and want to take responsibility for the decisions we make. And we really wanted to pay that money back, but circumstances at the time just didn't allow us to. So when we then got that clean slate, it was like, we are not going back there. We are not doing
No way.
it again. The lost sleep at night alone is just horrible because of that financial pressure that's pressing down on you because of these bills that you have. And so I am not one in favor at all of going into debt, except for very necessary things like a home. And even then, if you're going to be, well, you should do this whether you're going to be having a small business or not. Think about, am I going to be house poor by buying this house? And if you are, then it's not the right house to buy. Buy less and be happier because you'll have better sleep at night. You won't have to worry about making your payments on bills and such. And it just gives you a much better, more peaceful life. And I certainly appreciate, especially at my age now, I want peace in my life. I am a no drama person. And having debt is way too much drama.
Well, and I just want to address one thing that may be playing through the minds of people listening to us right now, Beth. And it's something I wondered about when we got started, having lived in a credit card world so long. What happens when you have to travel? What about flights and hotels and rental cars and all this? And I want to assure everybody that since Valor Circle was founded in 2010, so we're now 13 years later almost. In fact, I think November will be 13 years, if I'm not mistaken. there's never been a time at Valor Circle or since I've started Whitebeard, with all the business travel that has had to happen, with all the various things that the business has done, that we've ever had a problem or not been able to do something because we use debit cards instead of credit cards. I can't think of a single hotel or flight or car rental that we weren't able to do. Was there?
Car
Maybe I'm
rental.
wrong.
They may have changed this, but car rentals are traditionally tough. They really want a credit card that you can use. But if you're smart, you can go get a prepaid credit card, have just enough on there for the car rental, and then use that as well. But
And I'm
yeah,
pretty sure through Dave Ramsey is, if you're not familiar, Dave Ramsey is a huge proponent of not borrowing money. And I'm pretty sure that Ramsey Solutions or Enterprises or whatever they're called now, last just read the other day, a $670 million company. So they're not small potatoes. They actually have an arrangement. I want to say it's with Avis. I don't know that, but one of the major car rental companies now that they will accept those debit cards and they'll work through that with you. So again, it is there are struggles occasionally. I'm not going to say it's always as easy as walking up and throwing your card down, but I know at Valor Circle while I was there, I had to travel multiple times and rent cars, and I was able to do it. I don't remember all the details, but I never remember being turned down or not having that. And I think to us to speak to that, it was just a line in the sand that we had drawn that we weren't going to cross. And it was amazing to me, coming from a credit card lifestyle, how when we drew that line in the sand, all of a sudden other opportunities became available to us, or options to do things that we hadn't thought about before. Because in the past, it's like, well, okay, I this is where I did my car rentals at, and they need a credit card. But the moment we didn't have one to use, other options became available. And I don't remember the details, but when you told them, hey, I don't have a credit card. Okay, well, here's how we handle debit cards. So here's how we do this. Thinking, chiming into going to the hotel and things like that. There was never a problem that stopped us. We never found ourselves without transportation, without a place to stay, or unable to attend an event simply because we had made the decision not to use credit cards.
And I want to recommend to anybody who finds themselves in debt right now, whether you're an entrepreneur, you have your own business, or you don't, go to Dave Ramsey's website and check out his financial piece. He has
Mm.
just a bevy of information about how to get yourself out of debt. We've used those techniques with great success. To this day, put extra principal money on our mortgage to pay that down faster, so that we can pay it off sooner. It builds equity, and it's a great safety net. But go to Dave Ramsey and check it out so that you can, get some financial peace, because boy, sleeping well at night, it's huge. And having no debt allows you to do things that you couldn't do before because of financial restrictions. I remember hearing not too long ago about someone there in the home service business, and they were telling me about how people have a hard time even paying for repairs on their house, and they have to put those on credit cards because they're so house poor. They bought this magnificent house because maybe they felt they had to have granite counters, or they had to have lots of bedrooms, or they just wanted to keep up with the Joneses. But then that mortgage payment along with escrow for the insurance and the taxes is so great that they're literally poor. They have no expendable money for emergencies and things like that. So one of the first things Dave Ramsey has you do is get that baby fund. I don't know if you remember that, but save
The
up a
emergency
thousand
fund, yeah.
dollars and you put that aside. And I've done that for us, and we've got that aside. And then you start another savings account, and you can start feeding that as your credit card debt and such goes down. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. And the feeling of not having debt is so incredible compared to the feeling of having debt, that for me, there's just been no contest. I'm always going to go the no debt route.
Well, I admit I was a little harder nut to crack there. I was convinced that life was going to suck if I couldn't use my credit card. In fact, I remember the first time I heard about Dave Ramsey, I thought the people that were talking to me about going debt free were crazy, absolutely plumb crazy. And I didn't want anything to do with this guy. But I will tell you, it has absolutely changed my life for the better. And you can't put a price on, like you said, on good sleep. It's just
Mhm.
amazing not only the opportunities that it saved me from getting in that would have got me in a hole, but other opportunities that have come to us, because then when a true opportunity came along that we agreed made sense, we often had the money to do it because we hadn't blown it. We didn't have this huge debt load that we were carrying
Mhm.
that, oh my gosh, I
Mhm.
need to pay X number of thousands of dollars a month just to cover my debt load. That money was sitting in the bank account, available to invest in the business, available to take advantage of opportunities as they came up. And I think
Mhm.
we got better opportunities because of that.
Right, right. Well, when I first met you, you had some ideas, some methodologies that I thought were just a little off. Do you remember one of them was debt is a tool?
Well, and I think it's what a lot of business people still subscribe to. And there's an argument to be made. I'm not going to say that the path that you and I have chosen, Beth, fits for everybody. It definitely fit for us. And I think debt is a tool, but it's a double-edged tool, a double-edged sword, so to speak. And it's very sharp on both sides.
Mhm.
Um, not to get overly religious, but you and I are both Christians, and the Bible talks about how the borrower is slave to the lender.
Yes.
And I never understood that. In fact, I thought, pish posh, whatever. Oh my gosh, is that true, folks? I mean, that I cannot tell you how true that statement is. And if you've got debt and you think we're crazy, that's fine. Don't worry about it. We're not trying to tell you how to live your lives, but we want to share how impactful it has been to us to not take on debt, and how you
Mhm.
can still grow a successful business. In
Mhm.
our case, businesses, how you
Mhm.
can still be self-employed, how you can still be an entrepreneur, and how you can still serve others. In my opinion, serve them more abundantly, because again, you don't have debt that's taking your money every month. So you've got more to give.
More
And
flexibility, less
yeah,
restriction.
yeah,
Absolutely.
all
Mhm.
the way around.
Mhm.
Well,
Yep.
Beth, I know a lot of people think in when they talk to us about finances, they tend to start talking to me. It amazes me a little bit and surprises me a little bit in today's society that we're quite so. Is the word patriarchal? I'm not sure, but where they kind of assume, well, I'm the guy, so I must manage the money. And we do things a little bit differently. You want to share with people how we've really tried to lay into each other's strengths, and what one of those differences is that sometimes surprises people when it comes
Mhm.
to money management.
Mhm. Well, definitely with you and I, we try to uphold and lift up each other's strengths and try
Mm,
to kind of smooth the edges around each other's weaknesses. And part of that has been just our approach on money. It has been something that I deal with more logically and more objectively, and it doesn't cause me the stress that it causes you. So definitely in our relationship and in the businesses we've held jointly, I have handled the finances. It's just worked better. You're able to know because you trust me that all of that's taken care of. And there's a lot of things you don't know. Uh,
I'm okay with that.
you do know that, by the way, we do have a credit card now, but we pay it off every month religiously. Um, but that's a recent development, and I think when I brought it up that I wanted to get one for some purposes, I think it was for a trip actually.
Mm,
We were very, very hesitant to do that, and we had to make a commitment that we were going to keep that one really under control, and we have. But that's through wisdom and practice and habits, good habits, financially. But yeah, in our relationship, it just happens that it works out best that I handle the money.
it works out very well, and again, as Beth said, it's playing into our strengths. For whatever reason, finances stress me out, and for no particular reason, but they do, and they always have. Money has always been a stress factor for me. One of those things I worry about, and now I don't have to worry about it because
Mhm.
we're blessed to have enough to pay the bills. Sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less, as everybody knows. But I don't have to worry about the ups and downs, and the things that really there are no reason to worry about, but just would cause me stress. through that process. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, Beth handles all of those, and not to oversimplify it, but basically lets me know what money I can spend to buy gas and my occasional iced tea, and the rest of it she
Some of
handles.
that
And I'm
is
very thankful for that.
self-restriction, so it's not like I have told you that's all the money you
No,
can
no,
have.
not at all.
Those are
Not at all.
self-imposed limitations that you've put on yourself, so but
But
sometimes I
it's
think you
for
feel kinda good about actually bringing those up,
Well,
and
it's nice to point out just the difference again, and again, I want to say it's okay. I mean, I get to do the things that I need to do. There's nothing I've ever needed since we've met 20 years ago, 21 years ago now, that I can go, I needed this and I couldn't do it, or I couldn't get it, or anything like that. But it has saved me from doing things that I wanted to do, because I'm a little bit more financially emotional than you are. You're more financially logical. I'll never forget walking through Home Depot and seeing, this was probably 18 years ago when we were not in great financial stead. And I saw these shop lights that I just knew
I
we
remember
needed,
that.
and I absolutely had to have, and had every reason why they were on sale. And of course, man, I needed to get these shop lights. And you challenged me to wait 24 hours. And if I still wanted them in 24 hours, then we'd come back and get them. They'd still be on sale. And I remember I was mad. I did not want to wait 24 hours. And I think the next time I thought about it was about 4 weeks later. Um, and to this day, I've never bought those shop lights, and I've never missed those shop lights. But those things to me, and again, everybody's unique personality, those things, I'm an impulse buyer. And so those things happen all the time. I had to teach myself not to do that, both personally and in the business, because both of them can be very dangerous. And for us, at least, sticking to that no debt rule has really been a great guideline and a framework from within to work and protect ourselves, our team, and our finances.
I know that we're coming to an end of our time today, but there's so much more I would like to talk about regarding this, especially some very practical steps that, from our experience, we can share with our listeners to tell them what we've done to make life a little easier and how we got through some very specific times of hurt in the business. So, what do you say we do a part two to this?
I think that would be great. I know there's some things, and we're not very proud. We'll be happy to share some of the missteps that we've made, and some of those down moments when you go, okay, we've got enough to cover payroll, but just barely, and that payroll didn't include you and I. How
Mhm,
did we get by? How did
mhm,
we make decisions in the business to cut costs so we didn't have to cut staff? Things like that.
mhm. Yep, I would
So,
love to share those with our viewers.
sounds great. Well, if you've stuck with us today, we really appreciate it. And we want to encourage you to check back in for part two. You'll see that next as we talk about, again, specific ways that we as partners, as a couple, have dealt with that and dealt with the ups and the downs of the financial roller coaster. Thanks for joining us today, everybody, and make it a great day.
Have a great day.